In a room where dreams are often louder than doubt, no one expected a tiny 6-year-old boy from the Philippines to silence the entire America's Got Talent theater with just 10 fingers and a borrowed piano. What happened next left Simon Cowell wiping away tears on live television. If you believe miracles can walk on small feet, hit subscribe right now and stay with me for a story you will never forget. The lights inside the Pasadena Civic Auditorium glowed softly against the polished stage of America's Got Talent 2025. The audience buzzed with anticipation as the judges took their seats. Simon Cowell, Howie Mandel, Heidi Klum, and Sofia Vergara smiled politely at the next act listed on the screen. The name looked simple, almost fragile against the massive LED backdrop: Mateo Reyes, age 6, Philippines. Backstage, Mateo stood barely tall enough to see over the piano bench waiting for him on stage. His suit was slightly oversized, sleeves folded twice by a production assistant who whispered encouraging words he barely understood. English was not his first language. In fact, just 2 years ago, Mateo had barely spoken at all. Mateo had been born in a small coastal town near Cebu in the Philippines. His earliest memories were not of toys or playgrounds but of crowded rooms and long nights. His mother, a factory worker, struggled to provide for him after his father disappeared before Mateo turned 2. When a typhoon tore through their town, destroying their small home, everything changed. His mother fell ill months later and never recovered. At 4 years old, Mateo entered the foster care system. For weeks, he barely spoke. Social workers described him as distant, as if he were living in a world slightly behind everyone else. But one afternoon, while wandering through the community center attached to the foster home, he heard something that made him stop breathing. An old upright piano sat against the wall, chipped and slightly out of tune. A volunteer had been practicing a simple hymn. Mateo stood frozen, eyes wide. When the volunteer left, Mateo climbed onto the bench. He pressed one key, then another. The sounds were uneven, hesitant. But something in his face shifted. The foster mother, Maria Santos, watched from the doorway as this small boy who rarely spoke suddenly began pressing keys with surprising intention. Within weeks, he was picking out melodies by ear. Within months, he could replicate entire songs after hearing them once. Maria began uploading short clips of Mateo playing to social media, never expecting much. One video of him playing a complex classical piece on that broken piano caught attention in the United States. A music teacher from Los Angeles commented that the boy's sense of timing and emotional interpretation was far beyond his years. The video spread. A talent scout from America's Got Talent reached out. At first, Maria refused. The thought of flying a fragile 6-year-old across the world felt overwhelming. But when AGT offered to sponsor travel, provide translators, and ensure his comfort, she asked Mateo if he wanted to go to America. He nodded once and said the longest sentence she had ever heard him speak: "I want to play the big piano." Now, standing backstage in 2025, Mateo clutched a small wooden cross Maria had given him. The stage manager crouched to his level and asked if he was ready. Mateo nodded again. On stage, the audience reacted with a collective gasp. He looked so small walking toward the glossy grand piano. Simon Cowell leaned toward his microphone. "Hello there. What's your name?" Mateo stared at the lights for a moment before a translator stepped in. "He is Mateo. He is 6 years old. He is from the Philippines." Simon smiled. 6 years old. "And what are you going to do for us today?" The translator listened carefully to Mateo's whisper. "He says he will play something he wrote for his mother." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The audience quieted. Simon's expression softened, but he maintained his familiar skeptical posture. "We've heard emotional backstories before," his eyes seemed to say. The question was whether the talent would match the story. Mateo climbed onto the bench with help from a stagehand. His feet dangled, not reaching the pedals. A small extension had been set up so he could press them. He adjusted himself, closed his eyes, and placed his hands on the keys. The first notes were soft, almost too soft to hear. A simple melody emerged, fragile and searching. The crowd leaned in. The melody grew, adding harmonies that felt impossibly mature. His fingers moved faster, weaving through complex chord progressions that would challenge seasoned pianists. The piece transformed from gentle remembrance into a powerful surge of sound. Howie Mandel's jaw dropped. Heidi Klum covered her mouth. Sofia Vergara blinked rapidly as if trying to process what she was hearing. Then came the twist no one expected. Halfway through the performance, one of the piano keys produced a dull, muted sound. For a split second, it seemed the instrument had malfunctioned. A ripple of concern moved through the audience. At 6 years old, any distraction could derail him. Matteo did not stop. Instead, he shifted seamlessly, transposing the piece into a different key mid-performance, avoiding the damaged note entirely. It was not something a beginner could do. It required advanced understanding of music theory and instinct. Simon Cowell leaned forward sharply, eyes narrowing, no longer skeptical but stunned. The music intensified. It felt like a storm rolling in from the ocean, waves crashing against memory and loss. Then, just as suddenly, it softened into a lullaby. The final notes lingered in the air like a whispered goodbye. For 3 full seconds, there was silence. Not polite silence, shocked silence. Then the theater exploded. The crowd rose to its feet in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the walls. Heidi was already crying. Sofia reached for a tissue. Howie shook his head in disbelief. Simon Cowell did not immediately speak. He stared at the boy, who now sat quietly, hands folded in his lap. Finally, Simon cleared his throat. I have been doing this for a very long time. I have seen prodigies. I have seen viral sensations. But I have never, ever seen a 6-year-old control an audience like that. The camera zoomed in as Simon's voice cracked slightly. That wasn't just talent. That was life experience in music form. Matteo looked confused, glancing at the translator. Simon continued. When that key failed and you changed everything without even blinking, that told me this is real. You are the real deal. The audience cheered again. But the biggest twist was yet to come. As Simon reached toward the golden buzzer, the music swelled. Everyone expected the confetti to fall. But Simon paused. He lowered his hand. I'm not going to press this, he said. A murmur spread across the theater. Heidi looked shocked. Sofia whispered something to Howie. Simon continued, his voice firm. Because I want to see you do this again. I want America to vote for you. I don't want to push you through on emotion alone. I believe you can win this entire competition. The crowd erupted in applause at the confidence behind his words. But before the moment could settle, Heidi Klum slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from above, raining down over Matteo, who blinked in surprise as shimmering gold covered the piano and stage. Heidi rushed to hug him carefully, kneeling to his height. You are a miracle, she whispered. Backstage, Maria collapsed into tears, overwhelmed. Over the next weeks, Matteo became the heart of AGT 2025. His semi-final performance featured an original composition blending Filipino folk melodies with classical influences. He dedicated it to foster children around the world. His story spread across American media. News anchors called him the smallest giant in the competition. Yet pressure mounted. Online critics questioned whether the story was exaggerated. Some doubted a 6-year-old could compose at that level. Music experts analyzed his performances, ultimately confirming the authenticity of his talent. Each doubt only fueled public interest. In the finals, Matteo faced seasoned singers, dancers, and magicians. The stage felt larger than ever. Before playing, he surprised everyone by speaking directly into the microphone in careful English. I play for kids who feel alone. The final piece began with a single repeating note, like a heartbeat. It built into a triumphant anthem that felt less like a child's performance and more like a declaration of hope. By the final chord, the entire audience was standing again. When the winner was announced, there was a pause that seemed eternal. In third place, they called another contestant's name. In second place, the camera cut to Matteo and a powerhouse vocalist standing side by side. And then, the host announced it. Matteo Reyes. The 6-year-old foster child from the Philippines had just won America's Got Talent 2025. Simon Cowell walked on stage personally to congratulate him. As confetti fell once more, Simon bent down and said into the microphone, "You didn't just win a show. You reminded us why we started watching in the first place." Months later, Matteo used part of his prize money to renovate the very foster center where he first touched a piano. A new grand piano now stands there, polished and perfectly tuned, waiting for the next child who might discover their voice in its keys. From a storm-torn town in the Philippines to the biggest stage in America, a boy who once barely spoke had spoken louder than anyone through music.